those in the room, there's a lot of feedback, particularly when Sam got close.
That's it. Okay. So let's start. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the City of Providence COVID-19 Recovery and Resilience Task Force. This is a regular meeting. So today we will have opportunity to hear two presentations, but also to have a discussion about previous presentation and the result of the community input. My name is Oscar Mejias. I am co-chair of the task force, and I'm here with my colleague,
Angela and Coma.
who's the co-chair too, with a member of the task force. So let's proceed with the meeting. Will you please do the roll call?
Yes, Co-Chair Oscar Mejia,
Here.
Andrea Como,
Here.
Councilwoman Rebel McFortune, absent. Mayor,
Here online.
Larry Warner,
Here.
Chris McDonald, absent. Peter Aiken,
Here.
Michelle Shanks, here. Shannon Carroll, here. Sabrina Sylvia, here. Julian Frick,
Here.
Tim Carroll, absent. Paige Clark Clark, here. Eight members, and you have a quorum. Thank you.
Thank you. So let's start before our first topic. Let's get some information from about the survey outreach. Mr. Sam, when you're ready.
Right, thank you. Right now, we have 238 surveys. We're on track to get, I would say, somewhere close to 750 or close to 1,000. We sent out this morning, Wednesday, task force members to engage networks all over anyone who's connected to the community. We found out some right now we're doing that. We reached out to the past. So, you can engage your networks. Great improve and to the public as well. pdrescueplan.com/survey. A survey for your friends and family. We're going to turn into reports. You're going to see exactly what people are asking for, where they want to go, what the first thing they need, what effects COVID had on folks. Reach out for asking, helping get us to the line.
Thank you. Yeah, just to reinforce them the message, we will appreciate if anyone can help us to share the survey or invite the people to visit the PVD Rescue Plan website. Sharing your social media, please take just a few minutes to complete the survey. Thank you. So then, next topic is the discussion of previous presentation and community. That should be a free intervention. We want to hear from you. What do you think about the work that we have been doing in the last weeks? The previous presentation and the people who attend the community meetings, if that's opinion. We have 30 minutes to talk about it. Anyone who wants to give us your input?
opening the floor to hearing from task force members on how's it going so far, like a touch base. What do you think is going well? What are you hearing from the public? You know, the direction that we're headed, and so since we're getting close to the end, we want to make sure that we do a temperature pulse with everyone to see how everything's going. So feel free to share as appropriate.
Sure, so I attended the last one with the observe the community conversations with Latino Policy Institute, and I think those are both really well run, and I thought it was a great opportunity to talk to people. Especially the last one, I was able to, we were in a small group to have a conversation. I thought that was really helpful to dive in and have a deeper discussion. They have ones I've attended anyway, have a small group. So it'd be nice to figure out if there's a way that we can continue to reach out and have meaningful conversations with community members, but more of them or involve more residents. I'm sure we want to hear back from.
Thank you, Paige. Anyone else? Larry, I'll piggyback on Paige's remarks. I think the facility change conference will go a lot of insights from the community members. I'm wondering, as far as next steps in community engagement, if we think about touch points with the community, maybe going to setting up many conferences where people already are, in addition to online options, where people are able to connect with the technology that's definitely made it accessible. Whether it's childcare venues or other places where people are already gathering. The canvassing event will be helping with that as well. We're looking for small group or get a conversation with a couple of prompts and then help having the community respond to that and people benefit that. Thank you, Larry. Michelle?
I have a question. Just looking at slide 1 here, it says community proposal presentation. Is that meant to be time for community organizations to take proposals, or is that meant for like your conversation?
10-1, October 10th, that's for the first?
Yeah.
Community proposal presentation. Will anybody from the consultant team be able to give more background on that?
On the website and in other outlets, we're asking for more questions, suggestions, so there's any nonprofit community organizations and put in their proposals like their suggestions, and at that meeting we're time for them. That will be on the website, but the public events, the upcoming one that arrives, the large business anchor, the anchor business roundtable, and the in-person events will be right there. The first of October.
Sure. Okay.
We have some questions. Everyone should have a page with some questions. If you want to give us your opinion based on the meeting that we have in the past, what do you believe are the highest priority? We could talk 1 or 2 or 3 highest priority from your point of view, or any opinion based on that question would help us to move the discussion.
Julian?
So I think I'm glad that we're starting to dig into some of these discussion things. I think we could use some more time for that. I think the community engagement process has been good so far from what I've been able to participate in, especially with the Latino Policy Institute one, the main one. With these meetings, I think there's a lot of good information presented, and there's always Q&A and opportunity to weigh in. But I don't feel like as a body, we've had a chance to really start digging into really some of the tough questions and kind of the weighing and the priorities and kind of it doesn't there's like proposals that are being put forward, which all have a lot of merit in different ways. And then there's kind of general topics around priorities and things, and the connection between the two doesn't always necessarily seem to be being made. Like, how do we take, and especially the things that are, what I'm hearing from a lot of community members is kind of solutions that are intersectional. Not necessarily like, we want this department, or we want that department, or this proposal, or that proposal, like that level. It's about the overall themes that are a priority and things that connect the dots between different areas. And I think we're going to have some really hard conversations when we really start digging into, because they all have merit, but we don't have an infinite amount of money. And I think the last piece that I've been reflecting on is that we are talking about this as a life-changing investment, which I think in a lot of ways that's true. It is a once in a lifetime impact. But when you really get down to kind of like the size of the budget and how much does that play, it's not all that much, especially when we start dividing it up. And, we've got less than $100 million to make recommendations on out of the total package there. And when you compare that to the size of, the police budget every year, or the size of tax stabilization agreements, or the size of other major kind of investments, it's not all that much. And so it's depressing to me to think about this as being like our only shot to cover the full scope of needs that are out there, when there's a lot of money out there elsewhere that's being put towards not the things that are needed, not towards equity, not towards BIPOC communities, not towards where it needs to go. So that's just kind of a thing that I'm, this is not the only opportunity for that, and we need to push back on that narrative to some extent.
I think you bring up a good point, Julie, with, yes, it is a large investment. We do have a once in a lifetime opportunity. But again, it's from compared to the work that needs to be done and investments in the community. And so that leads me to think more of how do we leverage existing investments in areas, and we haven't really talked about that as a body. Like you mentioned, tax stabilization and other initiatives. So I think it's something that it should be on our radar as we're narrowing down our decisions and how we can leverage other investments in the city to be able to make a more impact, a systemic impact from a racial equity perspective. So thank you for that.
Other than the agribusiness roundtable, are there other opportunities for the corporate community to be heard, built in here? I know it's Providence Foundation that I funneled to you, and I'm just wondering if there's other opportunities like that.
So I'm understanding that one would definitely push in a survey. Two is the community, any other existing scheduled dates. Anybody who's welcome to attend is welcome. But I don't think that there's going to be any scheduled meetings unless there's specific group that wants to host them.
Okay.
And so I will defer if I'm speaking out of turn or anything like that. Okay, right, stop. Sounds about right?
Yeah.
All right, good.
So if the specific group like the Providence Foundation wanted to host one, we would be able to talk to you to do that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. Jay Shaw?
Now that I heard about that idea, I really think it's important that we stress the proposal idea. I didn't even know that was an option, and I think it's really important that we have community organizations involved in this investment, especially since those are the organizations that have people on the ground and are doing this work and will continue to do this work. So I would love to work on making sure able to push that community.
Okay, thank you. Want to recognize Councilwoman LaFortune as present, and then Sabrina, and then Shannon. I got you, okay.
Okay, just a reminder, please try to speak into the mic and wait until I actually hear you.
These are working? Okay.
Yeah, to piggyback off of what Dave Shell said, I haven't attended any of the small group conversations, but I have been speaking to peers and friends in the nonprofit sector, specifically the arts nonprofit and creative nonprofit sector. And a big question I'm getting asked is like, where is my entry point into this conversation? And so even seeing that, and I appreciate you going deeper and asking the question about how to approach it. And even as a task force member, I'm feeling confused about some of the processes. I know how to get the word out, and we're getting the resources in terms of graphics for call-ins, but it is still kind of disorienting in how to direct somebody to make a proposal and what would be considered a fleshed out proposal, specifically because many of the organizations that we've seen proposals from have the resources and kind of the know-how to do an RFP. And a lot of the organizations that I'm speaking to have not done RFPs of this level or have never worked outside of the nonprofit grant sector. So that's just, I think, a point that I wanted to bring up.
Thank you. Judith?
As a task force member, I agree with what you're all saying, that we've seen a lot of presentations, but I'm still not really clear on how we're going to make our decisions as far as allocations. When I attended the NAACP session, that was the first one, so we had to, kind of learn the process there. But I felt like people thought we already had made decisions, and they were asking us questions that we really had no idea about. So I think, we still need to listen. The things that rose to the top really there, housing continues to rise to the top, and transparency. People really want to know that, we're not choosing little, pet projects and things like that, and that, this is an objective process. And back to Julian's point, we're just one piece of our entire state. There's money coming from many different places. The community proposals, I think, will be great because we know there are a lot of programs out there that already have additional funding, and it will help us hone in on how we want to leverage these investments with those to really make a greater impact.
Thank you. Important.
Hi, thank you all for again being here, and I do apologize, I had something at maybe a mission right before this. But anyway, so I'm closer. So yeah, so I've gone to most of the meetings, most of the community meetings I've attended, and there is a lot of confusion around like the information. So I think there has to be a little bit more that's done to inform people about the process, the funding. And also, we have to also think about how can we better align with the state, because there are some additional funding that's coming in for other things. Because, there were some questions about like lead. There's funding that's coming in for infrastructure and lead infrastructure and replacing the pipelines, among other things. So I think there needs to be a little bit of, we should kind of provide a little bit more communication around that, but also have someone who's going to the state meetings from this task force, or maybe one of the consultants, and report back. But I think it's really important for us to be aligning with the state and how we're doing this. The other thing I've been thinking is, and thank you, Stephanie, for bringing up the point about like, a lot of these organizations, they really, some of them don't have like the support or resources to, propose or an RF or respond to an RFP per se. And so one of the things that we could think of is how do we also make this process accessible, more accessible to businesses that might not have the infrastructure, because they're the ones who need it the most. And a lot of those businesses or organizations, and I'm going to refer to nonprofits as a business because they hire people, they employ people, they provide a service. But how do we create an infrastructure where they have more access? I would also like to see, like, how can we create something where we can have different organizations present to the community, not just on a Friday. This is a tough time for many people. And a lot of organizations, there are people who reached out to me and they're like, well, how do I present? How do I get in front of the task force? How do I get in front of the committee? So I think we have to create a way. Maybe we do like an evening event where we have various, like maybe it's a few days and we have various organizations and businesses present to us their idea, have together, and we could provide like some resources so they could put together a business plan, but some sort of charrette or something where we have them presenting before the task force and the public. And the public also can provide some input or feedback from the presentation. The other thing too, you all have done a really great job in meeting with various communities and neighborhood associations, but there's still a lot of people that are still missing out of the conversation. So I've been just thinking about how do we further expand that, which is tough. And I say this also understanding that, like we have to also determine we have to provide the first set of recommendations by October, based on the timeline that's set, which I think, I don't know if we're ready for that yet. So it's about transparency again, making it more accessible, communication so folks know exactly the role of the task force, and also better aligning with what the state is doing. And finally, just creating an opportunity for organizations to be able to present, because I don't even know how we selected the groups that have presented to us so far. There's not a like an outline of like a process of even how to submit like a proposal. So I think we need to do a slight better job in that, in creating more.
Because I totally agree with what you say. Of course, we have behind us the time of the time. But make that we want to reach the more people that we want. That is complicated from the technical point of view. If we should all do Facebook Live every day, not everybody has access or the knowledge or the skill to connect online. So maybe every member of the task force could connect with specific communities and go representing the task force. That would be the way. However, we need to do a very good plan because of the time. That's one point. I have a question regarding when you mentioned to create an structure to help those small organizations to have access to those funds. Yeah. Are you thinking that one of the recommendations could be assign funding to provide technical assistance and creative support for all those organizations?
Yeah, so that could be one, and also how can we make sure that we can also use technology at the city level where there's a way they can submit their RFP and we can just kind of streamline or just make the process more simpler, right? Because I think right now it's a little bit complicated. And one thing I was just thinking as you were talking, it came to mind is rather than bring everybody at once and like come present, let's as a group also decide what are we going to prioritize first. So that way we can kind of be a little bit more strategic. So Shannon, and every single meeting that I've gone to, housing comes up. That is a reoccurring theme. Education comes up. That is a reoccurring theme. Supporting small businesses comes up. That's a reoccurring theme, and also environmental justice. So if you know housing has been the one consistently across the board, why don't we do something where we, like we say, you know, the first set of recommendations is going to be based on like how, because that need is so diverse, right? Or there's different ways for us to decide like how that looks like, but maybe we can make it a little bit more strategic and bring in organizations that can work around housing to present to us, and then we can kind of like determine how we can make some recommendations and where funding can go, whether it's for development, whether it's to support a particular organization that wants to kind of, you know, do some, you know, create more safer and healthier housing. But I think we need just to be a little bit more just strategic in outreach, but also bringing people in, because it's been like every week it's been a little all over the place. It's been great, but we just kind of need to, since I'm thinking of the timeline, we can bring it all in. Peter, Larry,
I think that's the point about once there's opportunity for organizations that we seek funding that is acceptable, good, but I don't think that people should be given the impression, or that it's my own sense that this group should not necessarily recommend funding to specific organizations. So, like, people can come with a great proposal, and that may have us say, we want the funding to go to support a certain type of project, but not to say that it should go to that organization for that funding, and that, you know, so then the question becomes, how do you have a process later on that is fair to everybody, and that really shows whether an organization can do it well, but also doesn't disadvantage those that don't write a lot of proposals. But I just think for now that it should be whatever is being kind of shown up on the website, that you can submit something for us to think about ideas in general,
Larry?
I want to piggyback on what Councilwoman Richardson and Peter were just discussing, and I think there's a couple of things for us to think about as far as next steps of this task force, which is one, what priorities that are based on intersectional issues that we're hearing about in different form, and then processes that we want to recommend. And I think, you know, the allocation, the direct allocation of funds is one thing, but the process to allocate those funds is another thing. And at the end of the day, it really lives with the city council, if I understand, to make those kind of decisions on where the dollars are going. So it would be helpful to hear, you know, Councilwoman from you or your colleagues, what would be most helpful from this body to inform the next steps of the city council. And if it's, you know, recommendations on process, partners such as, you know, Rhode Foundation, United Way, who can facilitate seeking opportunities in the community, or the TA that might be helpful to for-profits and nonprofits to access those funds. I think that's a conversation that we can have here also. But, you know, for informing what the recommendation from this body looks like would be helpful for us to think about how we, what next steps we take. But then also, balancing both hearing from the community to inform the priorities, the topical priorities, but then also the process to allocate. And then the last thing, just want to say, there's probably a lot of existing tools and resources that can be leveraged to facilitate community engagement. And Rhode Foundation has been doing a lot with the Make It Happen initiative at full state level allocation. That's something that probably can be replicated for local level conversations as well. Similarly, United Way is part of our strategic planning process and a lot of community engagement. So I would say, I would encourage, you know, both consultants and everyone to let's explore what existing processes and tools we have to facilitate collection of ideas and process for priority. Then again, if you think about the priority of the processes, whatever most helpful.
Just another word about housing, since that comes up all the time. You know, this is a once in a lifetime opportunity with a lot of money, and I feel like housing, it has been a problem for a long time now, and it's just getting worse and worse and worse. And it's such a huge undertaking. I think people don't want to deal with it because it's so big. So, you know, just to put another plug in for the housing emphasis is that because this is supposed to be transformative money, and it is a big chunk of money that we may not see again, maybe we should really try to tackle that big problem. And, you know, there are a lot of competing interests. You know, the problem with any sort of money, you know, there is scarcity. We have to make decisions. And so there are so many competing interests, but this just might be the time to emphasize.
Absolutely.
Do we know what the other prior grant funding avenues are that the city is pursuing, so that we're not working in a silo? To a little bit to what the councilwoman was saying. For example, municipalities are eligible for EDA grants that U.S. Commerce is putting out. The state is going to have their own process, so it would be helpful to know what the priorities are across the board, so that we don't sort of waste our time and our resources on things that are already being considered somewhere else.
And the Department of Education also has resources,
Right,
right?
and
And so, you know, making sure that I'm in full agreement for everything that I'm saying in terms of making sure that we're not, we're making as much synergy as possible. Larry, and then Councilman Corbin?
Yeah, that was part of what I wanted to get at. Is that I think it would be helpful for me to have a mapping exercise to be part of next steps. As far as once we have an understanding of what the issues are, whether silos or intersectional, kind of how we might be able to tackle them, what are the resources that are available to different offices, whether through Rhode, through the state, the county level of funding, and also going back to the early point is there are investments that neighboring communities may be making as well that tackle some of these regional issues. So it would be helpful to have an understanding of how what we're considering mapped out against what other neighboring communities and state level resources would be able to invest.
Thank you, Larry. Oh, welcome.
So my comment actually builds upon Larry's point about mapping. What I was going to say is perhaps one of the things that we could get is a list of the funding that has already come in. One, I know that, like you mentioned, Rhode Island Department of Education in July, they just got approved, their plan was approved by, you know, federal government or the Department of Education, Federal Department of Education, we should understand, what percentage of that funding is coming directly into Providence. We should also look at, some priorities of, heads, among other things. And that way, and I think that will also inform like our mapping process. And again, just being a little bit more strategic. And also, the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, they got some funding, some other funding are coming into other entities. But just, it's just in the end, some federal dollars are coming specifically for housing and infrastructure. So I think it's important to know, one, what percentage, the dollar amount that's come into Providence, which organizations have received it so far, what amount, because we also don't want to, we also want to make sure that we are doing, we're approaching this from an equity, framework, and we're also thinking about, well, who's already getting resources, how can we make sure other groups, other organizations, also get some sort of funding. It might not be even like the same amount because the work is not the same. The depth, the level of work, but we should definitely think about it from an equity framework to make sure it's accessible.
Thank you. Did I miss anyone?
If I can add on to the councilman's comments too, around, looking at information about where funding is going into, but in addition to the amount that each department is receiving, is what are their initial plans with that funding? So like for the education example, like we know, I think almost 185 million going to PCSD between the two funding sources, but we don't know yet what their plans are with that money. And again, an intersectionality, some of their plans might do really well or need more support in other ways, so we just need to know what they're going to do with it as well as how.
Thank you, Dave. Oh, Julian.
One last thing to add in, a really great discussion with everyone. Thank you all. Learning a lot just listening to everyone. One last thing that I think would be helpful, kind of looking back on the proposals we've heard specifically from different city departments. I found myself kind of each week, one of the questions asking is, what's the dollar ask? Like, how much are you looking for? And what's the breakdown? So there's a lot of kind of like really important general kind of initiatives, priorities, and needs. But in order to make decisions and start kind of getting into preliminary recommendations, we'll need to be able to kind of compare and see kind of what the kind of like top priority and secondary asks are from each one. I know some of them included this, not all of them did. And the other piece to that is thinking about, I know that a lot of this is, city dollars that'll go through city departments for the most part. It would be helpful to get a sense of what those departments are already currently doing or will be doing with these funds in terms of how much is kind of going internally to staff, how much is going to the community, when they're giving money to the community, which communities are they going to? I know just from kind of experience and kind of connecting that, some departments do a lot with a very little amount of resources and are really good at funding BIPOC artists, BIPOC communities, BIPOC small businesses, et cetera, whereas others don't do as much of that. And so that is not just around the topic area being a priority, but which parts of the city are really good at really making use of dollars effectively and getting them to partner communities in the local area. And that's something we've heard a lot in these community sessions, has been as direct as possible support to target communities and target organizations, and going with kind of trusted venues rather than kind of like, things that might sound good on paper and be a flashy new idea, but don't necessarily translate to the real priorities that people have every day.
Thank you, Julian. Did I miss anyone else?
I just want to ask you, please, because of the time, feel free to send any idea to one of the consultants. We usually during the week have opportunity to meet or something we need to advance, and instead of wait 1 week for the great idea that you are sharing, please send an email or something so we can work.
Is there questions on those virtual? Ma'am? Somebody look, Mayor. Go ahead, Mayor.
Let me try this. Can you all hear me? I'm sorry, can you all hear me well?
Yeah, hold on a second, we're increasing the sound so we can hear you better. Give us 1 second.
Sure.
Try again, try speaking again.
How's that? Can you hear me a little better?
Very little. This one's not working today.
Well, well, thank you everybody for your
We're gonna
comments.
listen, speak louder, and we're gonna listen really closely.
All right, I'll be very quick. So the first
A
thing
little
is
better, yeah.
thank you everybody for your comments. This is very helpful. We want to make the most out of this process. So before I say anything substantively, I do want to say that, you know, we should just be meeting over Zoom. And I appreciate, you know, folks being in attendance. It's very difficult, to be honest, you know, with the audio and all of that. We're all used to running Zoom meetings. They're more convenient for everyone. And so long as we're not taking any votes, we technically don't have to have a quorum. We can meet, substantively, every meeting can be the exact same way. And I think it'll be facilitated if we do it via Zoom. So that's plug number one, in one way that we can maximize, you know, the energy, the effort, and everyone's time, you know, here as part of this meeting. The second thing that I'll say is that, you know, all of this is extremely helpful. And I think that what would help is if the chairs and my team, we sit down in the intervening week, take all of this into account and present an agenda and an approach for the remaining meetings, so that we, you know, have like a clear path forward to address many of the concerns that were raised. So I'll pause there, but I just want to say thank you to everybody once again for all your thoughts.
Thank you, Mayor. We can hear you a little bit better now. Okay, yeah, slightly better. Anything else you want to say, Mayor, or anyone else virtually? Is there public comment? Okay. We'll take it. It's Jeremy.
Yes,
Jeremy, can you speak loud, because we're having technical difficulties today, okay?
Sure, I'll speak loud and
Okay.
I just wanted to mention my question is also in the Q&A, but I think Nerva covered a lot, and I also think that this was a very productive meeting in regards to what needs to happen, but what needs to happen most is we still need to abstract the data. We need to make sure that we're maximizing community input to make sure that we're actually utilizing the dollars for the damage that was actually committed during COVID and during this pandemic. We need to make sure that the liability is on the community and not on the people that are actually trying to brainstorm the best use of funds. Not only do we need to do that, but we also need to look at not just the money that's coming in from other revenue streams, but how we can utilize this money to create generational wealth. And I think that housing has proven time and time again to actually be that, to where, you know, we can create opportunities to get teachers or incentivize the people in the community to actually become homeowners or of that nature, to where they're actually increasing the value of their properties or whatnot. So I think that emphasis, it's not just becoming homeowners, but just having that shelter, having that, I think is the most important, and was clearly the most damage that was done was the displacement and this moratorium. So I think that it's very important that we focus on those topics and move from there, because I think that that's what this use of funds was for the recovery of the damage that was committed. And that's all.
Thank you, Jeremy. If there are no further discussions, thank you, do you have anything, Ray? Yes.
So, thank you very much. I'm Kate Branson. I'm here on behalf of One Neighborhood Builders, representing our executive director, Jennifer Hawkins. And I stand with Shannon Carroll, Council Member Horton. Absolutely,
our top proposals are to put $40 million of this money into housing. And we also believe very strongly that business improvement district could be $10 million. There's a lot of work to be done. We can't emphasize housing enough in this state. So much stems from people have a safe, healthy place to live, then they are much more able to look for a job, find a job, maintain their families and their safety and their health. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Kate. If you don't have any further comment, thank you very much, everyone, for the robust discussion. It is very helpful. I was speaking on behalf of the chair. It's very helpful to kind of have this touch base and help to look at how we can course correct moving forward. So thank you very much, both guests and task force members. We will move on to, we have 2 presentations scheduled today. Item number 3 on the agenda. The first one is economic stability, and we're expecting Brett and Hannah. I'm assuming Brett and Hannah are joining us virtually. I don't see Brett. Here.
Yes, this is Hannah. Brett is not here, but I am. And
okay, so you're gonna do the economic security stability.
Yes, I am. So I'm just gonna share my.
Just be mindful that speak as loud as you can because the sound is really low in this room. Okay.
Thank you. I will speak as loud as I can.
Thank you, Hannah.
Thank you all. Thank you for having me. As I said, my name is Hannah Khan. I'm the Deputy Director of Research and Development in the Mayor's Policy Office. And I'm going to be talking a little bit about economic stability today. If I can just, sorry. So I wanted to just start by saying you've already heard many presentations about things like food insecurity. Obviously, housing has come up over and over and over again. And those things are all obviously part of a family's economic stability. And I really don't want to repeat what you've already heard. So I'm going to be trying to focus a little bit more on the whole picture for families and how the landscape that low-income families are finding themselves in, especially in Providence during the pandemic. So I wanted to start by just laying out what families expenses actually are. And this table or chart comes from the Economic Progress Institute's Rhode Island Standard of Need from 2020. And it looks at, for a single parent raising 2 children, what it actually costs to live a comfortable, modest life. So their estimate is that for that family, they would need $66,000 approximately a year before taxes to make ends meet. And in particular, I want to call out the housing piece of this chart. You can see that it's estimated that housing would take about 20% of a family's income. That is based on the HUD fair market rent value. And we know that that is already really too low. So that assumes housing is going to cost about $1,100 a month for that family. We know that the average 2-bedroom apartment in Providence costs closer to $1,800 a month, even without including the east side. And so we know that that means that 54% of renters and 38% of homeowners are housing cost burdened, meaning they're spending not 20%, but over 33% of their income on housing every month. And you can look at this pie chart and really just see how that would really start to squeeze all the other necessary expenses people really need to purchase. And then the final thing I'll note about this table or this pie chart is that the hourly wage required to earn this amount of money is $31.76 an hour. The median wage in Rhode Island is only $22.77 an hour. So there are going to be a lot of families really struggling in Rhode Island to make ends meet based on that income, that the median income. And we know that just based on the geography and demographics of our state, a lot of those people are concentrated in Providence. So now I'm going to dive a little deeper into who actually the people struggling to make ends meet in Rhode Island are. And you can see from this table, it is not just a representative cross-section of our state. It is really concentrated among people of color, Rhode Islanders of color. So I didn't get into the full pie chart for single adults or two-parent families, but for a single adult, 52% of Rhode Islanders are not earning the $30,600 that they would need to make ends meet. For the single parent family, 74%, almost 3 out of 4 Rhode Islanders are not making enough to make ends meet. And then for a two-parent family, 27% of families are not making enough. And they would need $73,646 to make ends meet. And you can see that is concentrated among people who are Latinx, Black, or Asian. I will say about this chart, that the Black and Asian households are not included in the single parent or two parent family categories because the sample size were just too small to get reliable data. But I think we can pretty safely assume that if that data was available, it would show the same disproportionate impact that we see in single adults. I also just want to point out that I'm using this standard of need as opposed to the poverty line because it's a much more accurate representation of what it actually requires in Rhode Island to make ends meet. So for a single adult, the federal poverty line is $12,880. And I think we can all, understand how incredibly difficult it would be to make ends meet to survive on that budget. So that's why we're using these higher numbers. So now to look a little bit at the pandemic economic recovery, it has been uneven and it's been really exacerbated the pre-existing inequalities that were already in our society. So if you are in the highest income earner quintile, the highest 20% of income earners, you are actually more likely to be employed now than you were before the pandemic began by quite a bit. Even if you're in a middle wage quintile, you are actually likely to be in a stronger economic position now than you were before the pandemic. But if you are in that bottom quintile, you are really not recovered at all. You have seen a huge amount of jobs the jobs that you would have been qualified for have just disappeared. In particular, I think we know who is in that category of the bottom quintile. And again, it is not a random cross-section of our society. We know that women, young adults, and groups of color are particularly likely to be low-wage workers. So over a third are young adults aged 19 to 25. 58% of low-wage workers are women, as opposed to 47% of all workers. 23% of low-wage workers are Hispanic, compared to 18% of all workers, and 16% of low-wage workers are Black, compared to 12% of all workers. So those are the people who are in that bottom category, and those are the people who have really seen their economic position erode over the course of the pandemic. One final note about this slide, in particular, I think at the beginning of this week, we heard a lot, or you may have heard a lot about how poverty hasn't changed, has not gone up over the course of the pandemic. And I think what this table really shows us is that that's because of government aid and policy decisions the government has made. And whether that poverty rate continues to stay consistent or starts to creep up is really going to be the result of the choices that we make, then the government makes at this moment. So to shift a little bit to the existing programs and plans that we have to support low-income households in Providence, you can see that there's a lot of them. And this is really only touching what we're doing in the city. So it's not even getting into the state or the federal programs. You heard last week from the Healthy Communities Office about emergency food distribution. You've heard from the Planning Department about affordable housing development. The Providence Housing Authority has housing vouchers and subsidies. The Planning Department also issues community development block grants. You'll hear in just a few minutes about our education and youth enrichment opportunities, which our Parks and Recreation Department and our Policy Department and our school district all work on. The Office of Economic Opportunity works on workforce development programs. Our policy and public safety offices are looking at fines and fee reform. And then, we have community supports through things like our budget grants and our Department of Arts and Culture and Tourism and our planning department that do things like small business supports like Take It Outside that support our community libraries and our community centers. And the thing I'd just like to point out about this slide is how many different agencies are involved. It touches every agency we really try to support low-income families through so many different programs and policies. And that creates some challenges. It really creates a patchwork of support that some call a population that is actually overserved. Because receiving help requires navigating these multiple bureaucratic systems, all of which have their own red tape and rules and regulations and requirements. Each program has its own administration, which requires significant overhead costs. And programs are inflexible, slow, and they leave large holes in meeting the needs of low-income families. You could really easily spend your entire life as a full-time job trying to cobble together a living just from the many different sources of aid available to you and stay within their different eligibility requirements. And this patchwork of supports creates an environment in which low-income families are really disempowered. Families are unable to make the choices that make sense for them because they have to make the choices that fit the aid that is available to them. Families are at risk of losing benefits if they start to earn too much money, so it really disincentivizes getting more education or workforce development training a lot of the time. And then families are forced to really be reactive instead of proactive because oftentimes aid isn't available until you're in crisis. And so if you can't get help if you want to avoid that crisis. You have to wait until you're in that crisis to become eligible for aid a lot of the time. So the solutions that we are suggesting really try to center the needs of low-income families and really empower them to make the choices that make sense for them and not continue trying to fit into these boxes that the bureaucracy creates for them. So the first is expanding our guaranteed income pilot. We are in the process of, we have a pilot already in progress that will be serving 110 low-income Providence households. The eligibility for that pilot was any resident with income below 200% of the federal poverty level. But if we wanted to expand that, we could really easily adjust the eligibility requirements. They don't need to stay the same. And an expanded pilot could focus on those most impacted by COVID-19, which again is those low-income families, and many of them are low-income families of color. The second priority is truth, reconciliation, and reparations. The city has already gone through our truth and is in the middle of the reconciliation phase. And I think what those phases have told us is that it is not an accident that people of color are disproportionately in that lowest income quintile. That happened because of choices that the government, every level of the government has made throughout our history. And so investing in those hard-hit communities of color is really crucial. And is really what justice demands. And I will also say that the form that those reparations can take, it could take many, many different forms. It could be a down payment assistance program for buying houses. It could be a college savings accounts for young children. We want the form that takes to be guided by the first two phases, but the crucial part is investing in communities of color. A couple more priorities is first a responsible small dollar loan program. Nearly half of all Americans would struggle to pay a $400 emergency loan program. I'm sorry, a $400 emergency expense. But the most financial institutions don't provide that kind of a service. The only really reliable way to get a loan of that size is often a payday loan lender. And payday lenders are predatory and trap people in cycles of deepening poverty. So a responsible loan program, small dollar loan program, could help meet low-income household needs and help them advance their economic stability. And then finally, investing in our community libraries. Libraries promote economic stability for the entire community, allowing our community libraries to be open for more hours means more internet access so people can search and apply for jobs, means more youth enrichment activities, means more adult education programs, etc. And then second of all, providing adequate funding to allow the libraries to raise their staff salaries to a living wage not only will allow those workers to have economic stability of their own, but will ensure the sustainability of the libraries for the long term and allow them to continue into the future, being a real engine of economic stability for their communities. So in terms of opportunities to engage with partners and other funding sources, the first, for our guaranteed income pilot, the state is already funding benefits counseling for all of the participants of that pilot, and they might be willing to expand with us. We hope they would be. We also know that foundations such as the Ford Foundation, the Wend Foundation, the Kellogg Foundation are all interested in promoting economic and racial justice, and they might be willing to support pilots and initiatives aligned with that mission as well. And then finally, for the small dollar loan program, that's a real opportunity to partner with local financial institutions, local credit unions, for example. And that's really likely to be a win-win for everyone, because in fact, those programs are likely to be profitable after an initial investment. Very, very few people default on responsible loans of that size. So those are really a win-win for everyone. And now I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Any questions?
I don't have a question, but more of a comment. In our prior discussion, no one talked about childcare, and as we see, that's a huge expense and burden for a lot of our families. As an agency that has a childcare center and does a lot of workforce development, we also see that it is a critical work support. Childcare is a critical work support. So they go hand in hand. So I think when we look at all of this stuff, we need to keep that in mind, because now that 27%, housing is 20%, housing is, you can't do anything without a house or somewhere to live, but also you can't go to work if you don't have a child.
I want to have a comment about the clarity of this presentation. It was easy to follow, straightforward in the beginning with the numbers that made the recommendations really simple to understand, and the priorities were really clear. So I look forward to diving more into this on my own time, but appreciate how thorough this was. And comparatively, I felt like I received a lot of data and then clearly understand what the priorities that are being addressed are.
Glad you liked it.
Yeah, I just want to piggyback off of that. I feel like this is like a really good guide for us to take a look at and see exactly what is needed and what isn't next with the second draft. And I feel like that can be very helpful in our discussion moving forward. So even if we take this out of the context of the recommendations, we can still use it as a guide for other program recommendations that we receive as well.
Thank you. I can hear you, Tim.
All right, there are two groups of hand raised.
You virtual?
Yeah, but some follow.
Can we take them at the end of this, or is it for the speaker?
You have a public comment.
Okay, yeah, we'll do it in the public comment section. The speaker will stay on, and so if it's specific to the person who just presented. Next, we have a presentation from Jillian.
Yes, it's Jillian.
All right, Jillian, you're up next.
Can everyone hear me?
You can, as good as we get today.
Great. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen also, and I'll try to keep a timer beside me to watch here. Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jillian Fain. I am the Director of Education and Opportunity for the city. And I work with both the policy office as well as our Office of Economic Opportunity. So the presentation we have for you today is all surrounding youth and education investments. And when we're thinking about these investments, I just want you to know that as a city, when we say youth and education, we're talking specifically from cradle to career. So we look at our youngest population all the way up to those that come through college. So I'm going to start with some statistics for everyone and let you know where we're at as a city. So the first statistic that I'm sharing with you here is our 2021 Providence enrollment. So all of our numbers are very current. And just for context, we receive most of our numbers from the kids count. So the number of children we have in Providence right now from the ages of birth to 3 is around 7,609 students. Once we pass that age gap, we're looking at students that are enrolled in our Providence Public School District. That number of students is somewhere in the range of 22,400 students. And then the number of students that we have in our district right now that identify as a multilingual learner are about 32% of our population. And then of our population of around that 22,000 students, when we're testing them to find out if they're meeting a 3rd grade reading level, we're seeing that about 1 in 4 students, or 26% of our students, are meeting that grade reading level. So we're still missing the mark on around 3/4 of our students in the district. Next, I'm going to ask you to look over to the left of the screen, and this is going to talk a little bit about our pre-K population. So as many of you might know, state pre-K is something that has been a priority of both the mayor and the governor for the recent years in the past. So when we're talking about how we're going to bring quality to our children, we think about this first interaction we have with them, which is around the pre-K age. The point of state pre-K is obviously to provide a free program for 4-year-olds so that they are pre-ready for their kindergarten experience. So as you can see, we've consistently over the past few years had around the same number of 4-year-olds in the city. So we have around 1,679 4-year-olds. Of those children, we know that about 885 of them are enrolled in our Head Start program. And Head Start is something that is braided funding through a federal funding formula as well. In our public schools, we have about 334 pre-K students. So the state number that's estimated in our pre-K state classrooms is around 23% of these students. And the children that are either in Head Start or pre-K, with that number combined, makes up about half of our 4-year-old population. And if we add in our district students, there's about 73% of 4-year-olds in Providence that have some pre-K experience at this very moment. Now, that would be a great number, except that we don't just look at how many students are accessing pre-K, but we also look at the number of quality that they're provided. So I want to move your attention now to that bottom chart. So this is the chart that looks at the Bright Stars quality rating system. So this is a system that the state has decided to use and is also well known nationally to determine if a licensed program has a quality rating or not. So there's a scale of 1 to 5 stars that any program could get, obviously 5 being the best and 1 being the worst. If a program has 3 stars or more, they're considered a quality program. So that very first row that you see there is early learning facilities in Providence. Currently, right now, we have 53 learning facilities in Providence. Of those 53, we know that 75% of them participate in this quality program. And of the programs that participate in quality, only 25% of them are considered a high quality program for our students. Now I want to just take you to that second line, which is our home daycares. In the city of Providence right now, we have 241 home daycare programs. An even larger amount of home daycares are in the Bright Star system. So about 93% of our providers participate in this Bright Stars. However, only 1% of these programs are high quality programs. So the biggest gap that we're looking to fulfill right now is this quality gap that we have for students. I apologize, my screen's taking a second here. Okay, and now I'm going to jump into some of our older age group. And when I'm talking about our older age group, I'm talking about our kindergarten all the way through 12th grade. The first thing we want to bring attention to is the fact that many of our students in Providence don't have a college savings account. The largest college savings account that we know of in Providence right now has 526 students enrolled. And of those students, 97% of them are students of color, and 90% of them are identified as a low-income family. We know that having a college savings account that is associated with improved expectations, increased socio-emotional development, improved academic success in K-12, and increased financial and capability and financial well-being. The research also indicates that the positive impact of college savings account on children's social emotional functioning is similar to the impact of participating in early Head Start. So when we're thinking about our cradle to career, we know that if we're having students in our early Head Start programs and they're also exposed to a college savings account, that they are about 4 times more likely to attend a college. Now, if you look to the left, I just want to update everyone on what our One Providence for Youth jobs looked like this year. So think of moving on from elementary now to our high school youth. The number of youth who are employed through our One Providence for Youth summer jobs this summer was around 185 students. And the number of youth who were being employed by our year-long funding is around 460 students. Just to clarify here, we define youth in this program as ages 14 to 24. And the number of youth who participate in a Learn to Earn program, and I will briefly explain that, is about 50 students. Learn to Earn is where we allow students to make the opportunity to have a learning experience, but also earn money during the summer. So we don't want them to have to choose between having a job or earning, or I shouldn't say this, between having a job to earn money or learn something. So we have started this pilot program called Learn to Earn, where they can be exposed to both learning and earn money while they're doing so. So this is just to talk a little bit about the programs that already exist in the city that we either partner with or have done work with. So right now, when we think about early learning, we know programming is important, but we know more importantly than programming is the facilities and the quality that our students are experiencing within the centers that they go to. So last year we had LISC respond to a request for proposal that awarded them to provide specialized assessment and technical assistance to local childcare and early learning providers. So in the city of Providence, we spent money to renovate around 23 centers to bring their quality up. So early learning centers do serve ages 0 to around 5 years old, but we know that improving the quality space for the younger ages is what brings up the quality for our pre-K program. So they're all interconnected in the cradle to career. Another program that we support in Providence for our earliest children is the Providence Talks program. So this is a play group that's across Providence. We partner with the libraries and we have play groups that meet, and it's really to increase the parent and child interaction that we have. So a typical child's word count of low-income families is about 75% less than their peers that are in a higher income count. So we know that talking to children and providing access for parents to interact with their children and give feedback is far more helpful than if parents are left to their own devices to try to figure that out. The program I want to talk about is Providence Promise. The city partners with Providence Promise to promote high educational aspirations and more equitable opportunities for Providence public school and charter school students by advocating for college savings accounts, family engagement, increasing financial literacy, and reducing financial burdens of higher education. So, you know, something that's unique about this program is that they are not just a program that has a college savings account, but they have a program attached to it that involves engagement of families and students so that they're not just putting in their own money, but also have opportunities to earn money in other ways. Another program that we've seen in the city that probably most of you are familiar with is the One Providence for Youth program. So as I mentioned earlier, it is a workforce development system for our youth and emerging adults age 14 to 24. We bring together many government, business leaders, youth educators, community partners, and we address the complexities of youth unemployment and achieve tangible impacts in the lives of our youth. So we know that this is a big gap that we're meeting, and we want to teach our young people that getting employed at a young age and being experiencing and in these jobs is very important for them. I'm going to quickly go through the challenges here. I know we're almost at time. So obviously some of the challenges with most of these things is that we need more funding for specifics of these programs. The youth jobs, we know that we can only award certain amounts. So many of the RFPs we've seen go out to all of these programs are held in gaps because we are getting way more asks than we have funding. So there's a way greater need than there is funding that we can offer many of these programs. So the first priority that we're looking at is to continue funding our early learning facilities. We know how important this is, and we also in the process are looking at home daycares and knowing that giving dollars to homes is also improving the quality of some of the sites in our city. The second priority that we have is providing funding to increase parent-child interaction gaps as well as word count for our youngest population. The third priority we're looking at here is providing seed funding, that's savings for education, entrepreneurship, and down payment. Those are college savings accounts, and we're looking to do that for more than 9,000 Providence children over the next 5 years. Our fourth priority is providing additional funding to the One Providence for Youth Jobs program. We want to create more learn to earn models for our kids. We want them to not have to make that decision between earning money and learning a skill. And the last priority we have is funding for our Providence mentoring program. So in order to see sustainability in any of these programs, we know that they need to be running for about 3 to 5 years. And just some opportunities we have to engage other stakeholders. There is American Rescue Plan dollars that are going to be coming through the Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund. That's the ESSER fund. We hope to partner with them and influence some of the decisions they have on their ARPA funding as well. And another source is our Rhode Island Foundation. They have responsive grants, which we see used for urgent community needs, emerging opportunities, testing new ideas, and supporting proven programs. I hope I just included everything there for you in one presentation, and now I will open it up for questions.
Thank you, Jillian. Michelle.
I have two things. First, I would like to see, I don't know if this is possible or not, there's a number of students meeting third grade reading level, and it was at 26%. I would like to see if we can look that up based on like high school, middle school, elementary school, and see the disparities there. And then also I was wondering about the early learning facilities versus home daycare, the price point for that, and seeing the affordability for that for families. I wouldn't be surprised to see a disparity in that amount that parents and families are paying for home daycare versus early learning facilities, with the quality that is also available for that as well, to see how that compares.
Thank you, Michelle.
And just for context, we can certainly follow up with a little bit of a deeper dive for the committee on some of those numbers. We definitely have those available.
Thank you, Jillian. You talked about Providence Talk, and did you have any specific data you can refer, not necessarily now or maybe later, about success to date? I know it's an initiative that's been in Providence for some time, and so it'd be good to know what the longitudinal success thus far has been, to be able to understand a little bit more about the type of investment that's needed.
Absolutely, we can also provide that information. We have the past 5-year study that we can share with all of you.
And then another question about Providence Promise. I know there's a big push for college, and I know college is not for everyone. Does Providence Promise, if you do invest in that, does it also include funding for specific trades as well? Can you use those fundings for that, for those type of trades as well?
Yes, Providence Promise does offer multiple options for whatever post-secondary education is in our high schools.
Gotcha, thank you. Paige.
Thank you for your presentation, Jillian. Question about the support for early learning facilities. And the presentation said that there was 500,000 more that was asked for in funding that was not being met. Would you foresee, I'm curious, if funding was put in to help with early learning facilities, would that be impacting home daycares or the early learning facility? Or how do you see that kind of rolling out into which facilities will most likely benefit from that type of?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So our first round of funding focused on both center-based and home daycare systems. What we found was that we weren't having as many home daycares apply as we would have liked. So with the second round of funding that we offered to LISC, which is actually out to RFP at the moment, we really put a push for home daycares, and we found a lot more coming to the table looking for funding. What's unique about LISC is that they're now offering a technical assistance program to help the home daycares that might not be up to business standards in order to be eligible for this funding, be able to actually become eligible for that. So the hope is that we will actually be able to work with both homes and center-based, as we know during the pandemic that many parents are preferring home daycares over centers in some cases.
Thank you for your presentation, Jillian.
Thank you.
Do we still have questions from the committee or public?
Unfortunately, we don't have any more in the online.
There is, yeah? Is that two comments? Oh, sorry.
Oh, hi. I have a recommendation for my neighborhood. I guess that was the time to discuss it.
Yeah.
Okay. My name is Linda Perry, and I'm from Washington Park Association. And it is a frontline community of low-income residents. It is categorically on the front line in the poor area, hardest hit economically, health-wise. My recommendation is to retrofit and reuse the failed transfer station for a community solar facility, which would, I guess, fall into the 20% umbrella of housing, because everybody has a utility bill. A lot of people can't afford to pay their utility bills. So with the proceeds from this community solar, go back into the community as a community group, somebody would take ownership of this facility, go back into the programs of various youth services, jobs, mentoring, etc., and under the umbrella of a owner organization there. And it aligns with the climate justice plan, and it could be self-sustaining, meaning the power it would generate would currently the size would 150 homes, but it could be expanded to 300 homes. And it would empower the neighborhood itself to be proactive versus reactive on their existence. They could use the funding to go back into the community, and it would be a life-generating facility. It's not just a build it and forget it. It would be ongoing, producing energy, would go back into the community. The excess would go into programs. And it would support the hardest hit area that was hit by COVID and create economic stability. So I feel it's a win-win for the community to use a brown field, which must be, everybody wants to use it for urban solar. Has a lot of different pockets going on, and to generate the electricity for the community and to have that be an income generating facility for them, and then they would be able to choose how to utilize those funds. So it's a big picture, but it's an ongoing, you could last indefinitely to clean up the area and bring clean green solar to a stressed community. It would be the first of its kind.
Thank you, Linda.
You're welcome.
We appreciate it.
Anybody have any questions?
Linda, you could send out and send that.
Absolutely, I'm in the process of typing it up with the statistics, with health data, economic data, and physical layout.
Thank you.
I really appreciate your proposal, even in this form, as an initial example of kind of bringing this whole meeting full circle, where we were talking about how the priority issues that seem very large then became can actually feel applicable within our communities in Providence. And I think your pitch, even in this short form, was very helpful in seeing that pull through. So I really appreciate you coming.
Thank you. It's not a new ask. It's been out there for over a year. But I think the time has come, full circle. Now is we have an opportunity to actually make it happen.
Okay. Yes.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Cheryl Space, and I'm the library director at Providence Community Library. And I appreciated the conversation earlier about giving nonprofits and others the opportunity. I came today with a proposal, so I'll be quick, but there's going to be another opportunity. And I want to speak about the priority that was brought up about investment in the library. Just so that everyone is aware, during the pandemic, we saw 340,000 visitors, despite the pandemic. I just want to give an idea of the impact and how many people were serving. That's about half as many as we did pre-pandemic, and our growth has been about 10,000 people more coming in a month per library. So we were seeing incredible amounts of growth. In the pandemic, yet we still opened our doors on the libraries and have been there the entire time in many of the hardest hit communities. Second of all, we moved to 2,805 programs in the past fiscal year despite the pandemic. We saw 30,507 people in attendance. So we are still remaining vital despite the health pandemic. With ARPA funds, we have a couple of proposals. One is basically the air in our libraries, ventilation, you keep hearing that over and over again. To handle the exhaust system, we bring in all fresh air to our libraries right now. We had to use box fans for exhaust systems, in schools. For a cost of $975,000, we fix the exhaust systems in 7 of our library buildings and make them safe for the community. The second one is we have no HVAC system in our main memorial library. This is a neighborhood that really needs library services. We see a lot of people coming in the door for help with applications, for benefits, for jobs. We hosted the pilot for the guaranteed income pilot. There was a lot of things that were really neat. There were lots of folks who are embracing homelessness, coming to the internet. It is necessary community resource. And right now we have to move downstairs where we can put some AC into sort of empty rooms instead of being able to utilize the entire beautiful facility. The cost of that is $1 million to provide that air conditioning and also the fresh air. But we have a potential funder who has indicated willingness to financially support this project, but they do want to see some buy-in from the city or from other investors. So we are prepared to resubmit this application in December to the funder. We've already invested in the exterior of the library. We've already upgraded the electricity and the fire system. This is the next step. So this is what we're really comfortable in the building and more fully utilize it. So those are the specific infrastructure actions about that we can definitely across all of our activities of the COVID pandemic. The second thing is we've been working for 3 years on proposals and plans thinking about how to open up more hours. And we conducted focus groups this summer, 13 focus groups specifically with Spanish speakers in the community, all Spanish speakers. 85 out of 104 people out of a long list of reasons why it's challenging to get to the library. 85 of them identified as hours as a challenge. We had to prioritize after school hours, which we still value. We are open every afternoon, but we're only able to be open 1 morning a week in our small library. There's 2 in the large, and only 1 or 2 evenings. So 83, and so when we looked at that, what they really want is evening and weekend hours. That's the biggest need. And 83% of the respondents, they want to attend in-person programs. They consider the library a safe space, and they are looking for that place to be. In a postcard campaign we conducted during 2020 to survey residents in all of our libraries, 627 people responded, and 68% of the respondents wanted evening hours and 69% wanted Saturday hours. So they kept catching that over, and many of those are the same people obviously catching both, but we gave many different times to select from. So what would this mean for the neighborhood? As has been said, we can have more school readiness, especially in the morning. We do focus about this across playgroups. We are prepared to do much more, and in the past we were able to support those home daycare providers by having them come in to free programs. do that, we just need to be open and to have the funding. The second thing is we do host the CPD Young Makers program, and we could offer many more points of access to that program. We have seniors who told us they can't go out at night, they're really looking for those morning hours. They have lots of job hunters, as I said, coming in looking for help, and we're right there in the neighborhood and we can help people. And we have, the other meeting, 86% of our children who responded said they would attend social events in the library, and they're feeling incredibly isolated, socially isolated due to the pandemic. They're going to church, they're going to a park, but they would welcome more opportunities to interact, and they consider the library to be a safe space. This is expensive, but not as expensive as some other things that you heard. To increase the staff that are 10 hours at our three large libraries, $600,000 per year. We're receiving $1.3 million on top of the $500,000 we already received in ARPA funds that would enable us to expand into three larger libraries, provide more stable open hours in the small libraries, and have better staffing for 3 years. So this would provide some continuity for the community because it's hard to open up. I see that as a question. It's hard to open and then it's closed again after a year because we can't sustain staff. The second thing, the small libraries would have to hire 12 additional staff to have them open mornings, evenings, and Saturdays. That's more expensive. That is close to $2 million to hire those 12 staff. But we need custodians, we need other people in place to support that, in addition to 2 additional staff in every building. But I just want to add, our libraries are established safe places in the neighborhood. They are a city resource for everyone. They are trusted by residents and neighbors to be a safe place. The staff are warm, caring, they're information professionals, they're knowledgeable about the community. And so I encourage you to consider investing in the library. The board recommended it as a priority and as a way to really expand opportunities and serve the neighborhood as part of the protected. Thank you. And I'll put this all in the online form as well. But thank you for the opportunity.
We appreciate it. We have a question from Larry Warner and I believe Paige.
Thank you for the presentation and the context as far as community need and utilization. I was wondering, do you know how much the match is that the funder for the
The
match for the funder for the HVAC system?
Okay, so they asked us to come up with a minimum of $300,000.
Thank you.
They would like to see more, but that's the minimum that they're looking for.
I couldn't hear which library that was for. You said that one, and then for the second part where you were talking about the 3 largest, or the there was one where you said 7 different libraries, and so just kind of which ones, which ones are the 3 largest, and would be the focus for that.
Absolutely. So our 3 largest libraries are our regional libraries, so Mount Pleasant, Knight Memorial, and Rhode. We would be focusing first at Mount Pleasant and Knight Memorial because those are the neighborhoods that were harder hit by the pandemic. So that's where we're starting with the money that we were previously gotten. The HVAC system is for the Knight Memorial Library, so it's really a partnership by getting the HVAC going and then increasing the hours. That would be a beautiful partnership and service to the neighborhood. The 7 libraries are the only libraries that we do not own. We rent space in the Women's Grove Club in Mountain Point. So we wouldn't be keeping the funds. That would be the Women's Grove Club. I'm not sure to say. I know they're not using their new HVAC system. So I think they're in general, they're in better shape. But it's the other 7 libraries, so only the ones that look at all the libraries except Knight Memorial. Washington Park, South Valley.
Sure, take that question. Thank you very much. Sherry, right?
Cheryl.
Yep. Thank you, Cheryl.
Thank you.
Madeline?
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Madeline Champy, and I'm the Executive Director of Providence Promise. So I just wanted to take a moment to provide a little bit of background information and what our vision for the expansion to access to college savings accounts might look like. So as Jillian mentioned during her presentation, we serve a diverse group of families from across the city, of whom about 97% are families of color and about 90% are low income. And we work with families to open and fund college savings accounts or CSAs for their children and provide a robust array of ongoing family engagement programming and age-appropriate financial literacy. We also invest $100 into each child's CSA upon their enrollment in our program. And then our early scholarship program, which Jillian also referred to, gives families and kids opportunities to earn funds for their CSAs through educational and developmental achievements, advocacy work, family engagement programming, and many, many other opportunities. And currently we have 533 students enrolled who have accumulated over $500,000 in their college savings accounts. Jill alluded to a couple of the challenges of CSA programs, and across the country, these types of programs often require complex forms, don't have staff members that are able to walk families through the process, and in most cases do not offer financial incentives. So these challenges, which Providence Promise addresses, are also further complicated because these programs are almost entirely provided in English. So a few months ago, Mayor Lorsa had proposed an extensive college savings account initiative that would enroll 2,000 Providence children per year between birth and kindergarten and invest $100 in each of those accounts. So the initial phase of the program would be over the course of the next 5 years with an anticipated enrollment of about 9,500 Providence children. So the mayor requested that Providence Promise submit a detailed proposal to respond to this vision, for a comprehensive and sustainable CSA program for Providence. And we really believe that that would be an essential component to the education crisis we're facing with our schools. So we have submitted a copy of the proposal that should be made available to the task force, along with support letters from 10 of our community partners. And of course, we'd be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Before we go to the next, I just want to say, Cheryl, thank you for your presentation. And don't forget to add in the proposal that the libraries are the most suitable place for immigrant communities. They go to the library first place and whatever other place in the city. So it's important to mark.
Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you, Cheryl. Richard, another question?
Hi, I just wanted to mention with respect to the Providence Promise program, each family, when they enroll, agree to decide 1% of their income on an ongoing basis.
You barely hear you, Richard. Can you speak a little louder?
Sure. One part of the Providence Promise program is that each family enrolls, when they enroll their child, agrees to put up 1% of their income for an extended period of time. And those funds go into their college savings account. So it's a savings program, and it really brings the families into that type of thinking, long-term thinking. And we feel that that's very important. And as Madeline said, these families now have over $500,000 in their accounts. And these types of programs have been very, very successful in terms of creating a college-going culture within the community, in the school system, and of course within the families that are participating. And that's really a very important piece. And to have a program that's as deep as this program for the city and Providence Public School Department will become a leader in the whole CSA movement. I think that those are all important issues to think about as well. Thank you.
Okay. No, it's okay. It was challenging, I think, for all of us to hear that, but we'll make sure to take note of your comment in close.
Any other comment? I'd like to adjourn our meeting. Thank you, everyone, for your patience and presenting our meeting.
Thank you.
Have a good weekend, everyone.